This is actually a collaboration with my grandfather. He did his part March 25th, 1916, and then I later did my part in 2002. Um, the small bottle there was given to me years after it was done. It includes a small piece of bread and a letter. And the letter basically says, please save this. This is the last piece of bread my mother made the day before she died. So that was my great grandmother making bread for the family. So when I was given that, I carved the breadboard for that to rest in. And it's sort of the whole notion of what reliquaries are about anyway, a place to hold those things that are held sacred. And in this case, it will remain in the family for the duration, I suppose. Um, that's really what this is about. And it's sort of a nice jumping off point, thinking in terms of uh, growing up with my grandfather, particularly. He was primarily a wheat and corn farmer and that sort of thing. And I spent lots of hours with him. And he made everything. He didn't always have money to buy what he needed. So he and his sons spent time making the things that they needed. And I sort of learned from that as well. Go ahead, Mike. you know, and again, because my work is so involved in so many aspects of this American culture of ours, it's so easy to talk about. And perhaps, well, let's put it another way. It's not necessarily easy to talk about, but it's important that we talk about the things that are impacting us on a daily basis. In this case, this is a piece entitled Unconscious Bias. And, again, I did this about the same time I did the other piece in 2002. And I cast about 1,100 wax heads of Aunt Jemima. I allowed her to morph from being very, very dark to very, very light until she's almost transparent, just as the Aunt Jemima was before she was removed recently. Her hair became straighter, her features keener, and all those kinds of things. But what this is really talking about is the article that was in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it really was interesting because it was a survey of about 1,500 cardiologists, and the only thing that varied in the survey was race and gender. All the cardiovascular problems were the same. And what they found is that about 98% of the times, for those same cardiovascular problems, white males were referred to specialists, and African Americans and white females were given medicine and sent home. And when the doctors were shown the results of the survey, they said, well, it's not being done intentionally, so it must be an unconscious bias, hence the name. So I looked at this in terms of my own family. And when my father was having a heart attack, we called the doctor, and the doctor said, I would love to come see you, but I just got tickets to this baseball game. It's the last game of the season, and it was a local game. And he didn't come. So my father died a couple of hours later. My Aunt Estelle, and Aunt Estelle was my daughter's favorite aunt. She went to see a doctor here in town, was given medicine and sent home, and she was dead about an hour later. And then my cousin Junior, and Junior was that favorite cousin. I mean, that truly, truly favorite cousin. He gave me liquor to drink way early in life, talked about women, and drove fast cars. I mean, how could he not be a favorite cousin? So there he was checking out of the hospital in Charlotte, and I was there to pick him up, and he was complaining of chest pains and sweating profusely. And the nurse said, well, listen, when you get home, just take an antacid, you'll be fine. He died in the front seat with me about a block from the hospital. So that was unconscious bias playing out in my life in real terms, in real time. And I think many of us have suffered through those kinds of things. We're fully aware of what takes place and how it takes place. Next image, please.
Next one.
And if you don't mind, could you go back one,
Yeah.
please? Thank you. I wanted to say that the thing that was really interesting about this as well is that it was being shipped from one museum to another museum. And unfortunately, they weren't necessarily packed correctly. And then they set them out on the docks, waiting for the shipper to pick them up. So he picked them up, tossed them in the truck, but because these are all wax, all but about 25 of them shattered. So when they arrived at the next institution, I got this call. You know how folks will call you and talk really, really slow? They said, well, Juan, listen. And that's when you know something's wrong. But in any case, that's what happened in this. So even the insurance company sent them all back to me. Yeah. But next image, please.
This
this
one.
piece, I mean, really gets into the whole notion is, no, go back one, that one. This is Whose Song Shall I Sing? And it raises the question, should it be the Star Spangled Banner or Lift Every Voice and Sing? One speaks of pride and dignity and self-respect, and the other speaks of maintaining a stereotype and doing everything they possibly can to keep people sort of in their place, if you will. I'm sure many of you have looked at all the other verses of Key's poem and what it really talks about, and it's not about us in a very favorable way. Next image. This is one of my larger heads. It's 5 feet tall, about 4 feet wide. Um, and it's made of tin from my grandfather's barn. And then, of course, that player piano disc on it. And maybe by my song, it's talking about identity and recognition. And we are categorized, talked about in many ways because of the music that we listen to. And again, that's been going on forever as well. The whole notion of how we shape this American culture of ours and how we participate in it and our contributions to it are all tied to these kinds of things. And yet they are used often against us. Next image, please. So you look at this and sure, you think in terms of what it is you have to, the title of the piece is By Any Other Name. I'm sure many of you get that, right? May I see the next image? Just a close-up of it.
You
And
see?
it really is about By Any Other Name. So what do you have to see me is really what I'm asking. I was doing when I was doing a residency at Kohler Company in Wisconsin, we were casting a lot of iron and I was in my clothing for that. And I was having lunch and this woman saw me across the room in the restaurant and she was getting ready to empty her waste there in the trash receptacle. And I was probably 30 feet from her, but she went back to her table, which was about 6 feet away, picked up her purse, and then went back to empty her trash. And I said, we're fast, we just aren't that fast. Seriously. I said, you are afraid of me, and yet I could be the guy that could save your life. Next image, please. Hopefully many of you have seen this piece in the exhibition. It's entitled Help Me, Save Me, Love Me. And I was really talking about Katrina at the time. And it always felt like this huge puzzle had been taken apart that we couldn't get back together again. But it also talks about FEMA, the Red Cross, the Superdome, all those things that were intended to help people, but actually didn't. So you find people migrating around the Red Cross, around the Superdome, and FEMA just wasn't there. I mean, not in the way that they should have been. And in doing this piece, I decided I would use puzzle pieces to talk about these things, since it was this big puzzle. And to give you a sense of where this is coming from, may I have the next image, please? Just a close-up of that so you can see how I work with these things, and thousands of pieces, thousands and thousands of pieces. And the next image, please. So here are people waiting outside the Superdome, waiting to go inside. And this is the whole notion of where the puzzle pieces came from. In blowing this image up, may I see the next image? It pixelates in what looks to me like puzzle pieces. So it seemed really appropriate to go down that path and use them this way. And it's interesting too, in looking at this, we always imagine that we would be there when the people would be there to help us when we call them. And it doesn't matter who the us is, and again, understand that when I talk about who we are as an American culture, I'm talking about all of us. And I think it becomes really important to acknowledge that. May I have the next image, please? So with that in mind, this is I'll Save You Tomorrow. This is in the exhibition as well. And on the right side, you have that inverted boat. It won't save any of us at all. And on the left side, you have this red cross covered in white pearls, and the whole notion of the role that the thing we always hear our legislators say when there's a disaster, uh, a massive number of victims involved in one way or another, even regarding the recent shootings in America. So we're going to pray for them. And I always say, well, hell, we don't need their prayers. What we need is action. Could you stop praying for a while and just, do what you need to do to help us, any and all of us, if that's what's required. Next image, please. This becomes really important in thinking of Faulkner. The past is never dead, it's not even past. And the whole idea that things continue to play out over and over and over again. And we would think by now that some of them would have been solved. We would be interested enough in even simple things like gun control for whatever reason. I can't imagine that. But what do we have to do? Again, speaking of us as an American culture, all of us, and the impact that it has on all of us. Next image, please. So here we are. This is Jamaica, 1837. And this treadmill was also used in Charleston, and almost identical. And you notice that the people that are there, they're tied on. They can't really let go. So if they fall down, they simply hang on anyway. The two trustees are down there beating them with a cat of nine tails to make sure they continue to walk. And then that board that extends out in front of them keeps them upright so that they retire really, really quickly. You know how we walk on that treadmill, we can sort of lean into it and last forever, it seems. But you also notice that it's not really operating anything. There's no task being fulfilled by this treadmill. It's just a way of punishing people and breaking their spirit. So in looking at this and thinking about this, I created my own sort of sugar house, which is what it was called when it was in Charleston, South Carolina. May I have the next image, please? So this is Sugar House, and the painting is about 6 by 16 feet. Again, made up of puzzle pieces and acrylic paint, and in this case, lottery tickets. So you see that hand on the right, that's the hand of that banker in this case, holding on to that brass ring, which is what we all need to succeed, supposedly. But he's collecting people. And all those, and when you think about the last banking debacle, and where all the houses were underwater and that sort of thing, basically the bank ended up owning us. And as we move to the left, that treadmill in this case is made up of all lottery tickets. Those who can afford it least are the ones who play it most. There was a lottery in Delaware and one in Texas where I think it was a $100,000 scratch off. And people were spending their money, their rent money, their food money, everything, so that they could buy that lottery ticket, only to find out that the grand prize had already been won. They couldn't win. The states did eventually change their policy there to notify people when the grand prize had been won, but still an awful affair. It really was. And then as you move on to the left in this, those white clouds with sort of that cellular structure inside is dealing with the whole medical industry. More times than not, the reason we suffer as we do is because we don't have insurance. And they're not often willing to accommodate us because we don't have insurance. So I remember once being in the hospital and I was having all these tests done to check on my heart and that sort of thing, and they couldn't find anything at all. Couldn't find anything. And I was in there for 4 or 5 days and they were running tests supposedly. And at the end of it all, they said, well, we couldn't find anything, but if something happens again, just let us know. And about, I don't know, within 6 months, I had a heart attack and had 5 bypasses done. But of course, in the previous hospital, they couldn't find anything. Interesting affair, really interesting. Next image, please. Just a close-up of that, so you have some ideas of what I'm talking about when I say that I truly do use thousands and thousands of pieces of puzzle. Next image, please. This image is part of a suite of etchings entitled Ghost. And what I'm really talking about is how this ghost is sort of alive and well today, and the role that it played when it was really in real life, if you will, impacts us in many people in much the same way today. It really does. May I have the next image, please? And you look at these, and they're really sort of quiet images. We worked on these for about 10 years, actually, to get them the way we really wanted them to be. And they are quiet and subtle, but I also think that they, in that subtlety, it sort of speaks of the insidious nature of how they exist today. Because at the end of the day, may I have the next image, please? This is what they were coming from. So yes, people are still shackled today in various ways, educationally, economically, housing. There's a very, very long list of how these things still capture us, hold us in place. And keep in mind now, when I say us, I'm talking about all of us, not just black and brown. Because you see, it's almost impossible, to use these and at the same time not hold yourself in place because you're expending a lot of energy to make it work out just that way. I'm looking at what was happening recently with all the states changing their laws. They're putting forth a lot of effort to keep a lot of people from voting. They could be doing things that are far more productive for all of us. In this case,
Jesus Christ. Sorry.
that's all right there. In doing this, and when you look at the basketball goals that are in the Bartlett Center, um, what's happening here is that I'm talking about how our youth get used and how we tag them early to use them. You know, my daughter told me one time that I really need to lighten up when I talk about things. I was doing a talk for this museum. She said, "So, well, you may want to lighten up just a little bit." And I'm saying, "Really? For real?" Because see, I know the guy that I'm talking about here, or the kids that I'm talking about here. In the middle of this, and you can barely see it, there's a thing that says age 13, age 12, age 9, because we tag these boys and girls really, really early. And I'm using a cattle ear tag here. And with that basketball hoop, the shadow that's being cast almost becomes a halo because we expect them to be our saviors. They're going to save the school, the coach, the family, but not always themselves. Next image, please. This is the front of Foundation. And Foundation was done, uh, I guess it was 2004, I believe. And this is the front of it. It's looking at the limestone foundations of our municipal buildings. And in looking at them this way, they're always sort of clean and pristine and beautiful. And I always thought that was really, really great in seeing them that way. But you also realize very, very quickly that we're not looking at who's actually holding it up, which is what the backside is all about. We'll spend a lot of time putting that foundation in place, ensuring the success of this country. Next image, please. And this piece, and again, the title of the piece is "Some Clouds Are Darker," and it's in the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Um, and it's really looking at the whole notion of how looking at the not only us being held in place, but when we first came to this country. But I imagine that all those folks who passed away, their souls went into this earth, and with that sun and the heat and the moisture, it pulled us into the sky. And when we rained back down, you know, we created darker clouds, and our raindrops were always dark and black. Some clouds are darker. There's no way around it. And the next image, please. And this is my studio. It's a fun place to work. It really is. It's interesting that you can see I'll Save You Tomorrow and Help Me Save Me Love Me on the right side there. Um, but I was just in there today packing work, as a matter of fact. But I work 7 days a week in the studio, and it's always great getting in there, spending time. It really is. Next image, please. And I wanted you just to see, this is a public piece I did for a museum in Charlotte for the Harvey B. Gantt Center, and designed the plaza, the beacon that went on the plaza. And the next image, please. And this is how it really turned out. It's made of black wasabi granite and the other granites that are part of the plaza itself as well. And the next image. So that gives you some idea. And the thing that's really sort of interesting for me in doing this, and is I always talk about it in terms of how we approach public art, that we never say, no, we can't do that. When this was designed initially, it weighed about 70,000 pounds. They said, well, you have to get rid of about 36 or 38,000 pounds of it because there's a 6-story parking lot going underneath it. I said, well, can you do that? I said, well, of course we can. No doubt about it. And of course, in that moment, I didn't know exactly how we wanted to do it, but I figured we could. And we did. We ended up breaking it up into smaller pieces and hollowing out the inside of it and all that. But listen, thank you for looking at these. And I look forward to your comments and questions as well as we move forward here.